Today's unSeminary podcast episode is brought to you by Church Community Builder. I love how these guys help church leaders make and grow disciples by providing software and coaching focused on improving operational effectiveness. Church Community Builder provides leaders like me with insights into engagement of our church community, helping us close the gaps that allow people to slip away unnoticed. Visit churchcommunitybuilder.com to learn more.
Welcome to the unSeminary podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up and let's get started with this week's unSeminary podcast.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to the unSeminary podcast. My name's Rich, the host here, and happy Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. We know you've got a lot going on at your church as you get ready for this weekend, and we're just honored that you would take some time out to listen to us today. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Reggie McNeal from Leadership Network. For people that don't know, Leadership Network, and if you don't know who Leadership Network is, you might be under a rock somewhere, began in 1984 with 20 leaders and now serves over 200,000 leaders around the world. They really are incredible at identifying kind of where is God working at the edges of his kingdom and helping that spread really to a bunch of different churches, and really been incredibly influential. And Reggie has been a part of that. Reggie, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Rich. Thank you. What a great intro for my organization. I'll be sure to tell our CEO that you did us proud there.
Okay, nice. That's great. Reggie, why don't you tell us about your kind of particular area of interest or expertise within kind of the Leadership Network mafia?
Well, my particular assignment right now, where I'm doing research and development, is in the whole area of city impact. It grew out of a missional conversation that before that I was doing missional renaissance leadership communities, and where I would convene teams and we would think of ways that they could accelerate their community engagement. Well, now I'm working with teams who are very involved in their communities because we've seen a real growth in that over the last half dozen years. Now I want to help teams who are already very significantly engaged with their community and accelerate their development to create cross-domain collaboratives that can really focus on and move the needle on big issues like literacy or community health care or something like that. So I think it's a natural outgrowth of the missional conversation, and actually these days I'm positioning it in what I'm calling a kingdom-centric kind of agenda.
So when you talk about kind of cross-domain, is that like cross multiple churches, cross a series of issues to kind of work together? What does that look like?
Well, by cross-domain, I mean, how does the faith community come out and play with other societal sectors like the business community, the political community, the education, or So there's 6 or 7 or sometimes up to 14 different people slice and dice it differently, but private sector, public sector, social sector, those kinds of things. So the church is not going to be able, in its own silo and in our own little playground, for instance, if we're working on literacy, we can sit in our church fellowship hall all day, we can recruit volunteers all day, but if we don't work with the education sector, the business sector, then those ideas go nowhere. So, but collaborating is something we didn't learn in seminary, so we don't have to unseminary that part. It's a different kind of competency. We have to listen more. We have to be more patient. We have to build trust. We have to be clear in our communication. We have to establish expectations, promising only what we can deliver. I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues around that whole collaborative piece. And so what I do is I help church leaders who really do want to unbundle the social capital locked up in their congregations and release it back to the community to really make a big difference. I help them know how to do that better. There's what the preconditions are, and then what the collaborative path looks like.
That's incredible. I think there are a lot of church leaders who may have the heart for, hey, we want to reach out, we want to take some steps to collaborate with the people in the government and, business leaders, but they just don't know where to start. I remember a couple of years ago that Reveal study out of Willow talked about one of the kind of core things they found of growing churches was that their leaders were community connectors outside of the church, that they, were people who were looking to build bridges with, the local community. Where does a church leader even start with that? What does that look like? How do you go from being maybe my own local church-centric, to more of a kingdom-focused or more like what you've said, kingdom-centric approach? What does that look like?
Well, I think there are three things that have to happen to shift a culture. There are things that have to happen in the leader, but the culture ultimately has to support that leader in this shift from church-centric to kingdom-centric. And so I help leaders think through three legs of a stool there, if that's the right analogy, or three pieces. And you don't get a pass on any of them. I mean, it's out of three. Right. B plus is not going to make it.
Right.
So you have to pay attention to language. You literally have to shift your language. And what I mean by that, it's the narrative. What do we talk about? How do we talk about it? For the last 500 years in the Reformation, it's all been about, getting the church right, and all the discussion's been ecclesiological somehow. I mean, we'll take any topic and bring it inside the church, whether it's gifts or, we'll even quote stuff out of Ephesians that was, written, for instance, for folks who didn't have church jobs. We turn those gifts and offices and all that into church jobs. It's kind of amazing how we can fit our own experience back even into biblical stuff. But over the last 500 years, then, we've been trying to figure out, what makes a church and who can do what, when, can they wear a skirt, can it happen on Tuesday night, all that kind of business. Well, all right. I can tell you that conversation has probably run its course with most of us, and I can promise you it's run its course with people outside the church. That's just a narrative that just doesn't have traction. However, a kingdom narrative is all about life. It's about the life God wants people to live. Jesus says, "I've come to give you life." He preached in, the kingdom of God. So, I would say if he preached the kingdom of God, we ought to pay attention to it. He didn't preach the gospel of the church. It was the gospel of the kingdom. And then he qualified the kind of, I'm the way, the truth, the life. And that's how I basically tell people to talk about kingdom, because I can't go out and run a banner on your church. We're a kingdom-centric church. People, what is Saudi Arabia? What kingdom are you talking about? So, yes. But let's talk about life. That's the issue. That's what the kingdom's all about. Which, by the way, takes us then into a much wider array of issues than simply what's the fall series.
Yes, right. What are we talking about this weekend?
Employment. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about literacy. We're talking about big stuff here. All right. Second thing you have to do, besides the language and the narrative and all that, is, and by the way, I should, you also, when you're talking, so when I do consultings with congregations, we actually, I'll actually help them go through their gathering, their weekend experience or whatever. Was the community ever mentioned? Did we ever pray for the community? When's the last time we had a community leader in, interviewed them and prayed over them? I mean, it's just, or on our website, can you go to the children's ministry page? Is it all about, boy, we need some help on Sundays? Right. Or if I want a tutor down at the local school, can I, and we have a partnership there, can I sign up for there? I mean, it's just a whole array of communication about it. Second thing.
Before we leave the language thing, just one quick piece of that. Just a little story from our own church. We a couple of years ago challenged all our campus pastors to get a meeting, get a meeting with the mayor in all the towns we were in, and simply ask this question. And I don't know if this is the kind of thing you're talking about. Sure. Simply ask the question: what can we do to help this city? Yeah. We can mobilize volunteers. We're good at that. We can pull people together. And what can we do to help? And in one of our campuses, so that was well received in all the cities we were in. In one of our campus, the mayor literally sat back in his chair and said, "I have never had any faith community ask me this question."
Exactly.
And I won't say the town because I don't want to reveal the mayor because of what I'm saying. That mayor actually, he's not for what I know, he doesn't attend church. He's not, I don't know what his, personal faith background is. He doesn't, no outward signs of that. The next week we received a check from him personally with a note that said, "I don't know what is happening at your church, but I am just so glad, and we're looking forward to working together."
Wow.
And he ended up obviously following up. We ended up doing some stuff in that community that we would have never identified. We would have never said, hey, this is the kind of thing we did. He said, hey, here's a particular constituent group that's underserved in our community. It would be great if you could help. And that's begun an incredible partnership in that town that's grown and blossomed into other things.
That was brilliant. And that's what collaboration is. I mean, it's the move from, we've seen this move of what I call progression of prepositions in the missional conversation and now kingdom conversation from years ago we were just helping churches try to pay attention to the community they were in because we're parachuting in. A lot of times the community had changed. But then we went to so we were doing a lot of things for our communities, externally focused, all that. All fine. Now the preposition is with. And that is the incarnational preposition.
Don't miss that, people. That was very good. Going from in to for to with. That's great.
It's a huge jump from for to with. It changes everything.
Right.
It moves the center of gravity off of us to the larger, kingdom. And
cool.
And you're going out to those mayors to ask them, what is it you need here to help? I've got a great story. I mean, we had. I was talking to this priest, Episcopal priest in Dallas, had moved there, taken on a new parish, went to the local elementary school, and said, I'm a parish priest, but I think of the community as my parish. See, that's a kingdom mentality. And he said, so how can we help here? And the principal said, let me think about that. And so, he goes back, he writes back to the principal, enjoyed the time today, look forward to hearing back. She forwards it, doesn't take his name off of that line, forwards it to a colleague. I had this religious nut come see me.
Oh, no.
And I do, So the colleague writes back in, reply all. This guy's watching this back and forth and says, give him a menial job. And so he would have done it anyway, but she fires back, we need a school crossing guard. And I'm saying this to say whatever it is that people say, if you go to say, what can we do to help, or what's the one thing that we could do that would make the most difference, you better pay attention. Start with what they give you. So this guy said, I'm your man. I don't know if you've ever been a school crossing guard. Fun. Get up before God. You're dodging people that are on the phone and putting on makeup and drinking coffee and their kid. So but 6 months later, he's in like Flint. Anytime a kid, a divorce or a house burns down or move. He or grief in the family. He's the go-to guy there. And now he's able to bring, he could have started and say, I've got 200 volunteers I could only, but now he's able to bring them into that, because he was simply willing to be a servant. His end. And so that it just changes everything in our minds. But it kind of challenges, it really does challenge our hubris in us as spiritual leaders. It's kind of been born with, we know what's good for people. After all, so just listen, let me tell you what.
Nice.
To approach it with the humble, it totally changes the narrative.
Changes the picture. So that was the first thing, deal with the language. What are some other things as we try to make this shift we need to be wrestling through?
Two other things. If you want to interrupt, I can get through this. I'm a little tired of being interrupted here. Your folks don't know me. I don't grin. It takes energy. The only time I'm messing with you is when my mouth's moving. So the second thing is the scorecard. You have to change the scorecard. And some people don't like my use of the word score. Well, don't. Okay, that's good. Don't use it. But my point is, whatever it is you celebrate in your system, in your culture, that's what people think is the big deal. So if we're only celebrating church-centric metrics, like how many folks came, how much money did they bring, how often do they come, all these church activities led by church people, for church people, consumed by church people, on church property, all that stuff, then people are going to think, oh, okay, this is what's really important to God, and actually he's taking his own cues, for how the kingdom's going based on Sunday attendance. What a shrink wrap notion. But if we have the courage and the guts to shift our scorecard to say, we're driving the number of hungry kids in our school system to zero, or we're taking the number of kids off the first grade reading list, or at risk list. If we have the guts to hook our scorecard to actually people enjoying better lives in our community, then that certainly changes priorities, it changes budgeting, it changes everything. And this is what I'm encouraging folks to do and challenging them to do, quite honestly, because I kind of feel like it's a bit idolatrous to keep celebrating the fact that we have 10 more people or 100 more or 1,000 more folks come into our deal. But, our town's going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, Jeremiah 29, that thing about seek the welfare of the city. I mean, to exiles, and that's us in our culture now. Suddenly we woke up and that's where we are. I mean, if you're going to seek the welfare of the city and pray for it, because if it prospers, you'll prosper. Well, then what does that scorecard look like? So, and this is hand-to-hand combat, though. I'm telling you, this is not easy because we have 1,700 years of deeply entrenched church-centric metrics just to gauge how we're doing.
Now, just on that, let me play the devil's advocate here, using that word, particularly. Are there people that listen into you? Leadership Network does come out of kind of a pretty standard, I would say, evangelical, kind of part of the Christian community, who we have become very good at counting nickels and noses. And we love that stuff. They listen to you, they listen to the challenge, and they say, yeah, but isn't this just all that kind of social justice stuff? Yeah. Do we, what do we really care about all that? Or isn't it just about conversions?
Yeah, I run into this all the time, and I appreciate the question. First of all, I do want to say what part of the gospel is not supposed to have social implications. If we understand the gospel and the holistic nature of what God is up to, restoring everything that sin tarnished, diminished, broke in the fall, then backing away from any part of that, to me, seems kind of cowardly. And quite honestly, but I understand the historical context we're in. 100 years ago, when fundamentalism showed up, it just drove a wedge in American Christianity between mainline denominations who, suddenly began to backpedal off of the Jesus claims because, they didn't want to be viewed as those fundamentalists over there. But they hung in there. I mean, they hung in the soup kitchens. I mean, you go to inner cities, and I mean, it's the mainline denominations that still have a presence, and us evangelicals acting like we just discovered social justice kind of goes a little thin. Some of the groups, or Catholic Charities, or whatever. I mean, there are folks that have hung in there forever. But backpedaling from the Jesus piece has been particularly a challenge. And when I work with these groups, and I do work with a lot of, I'll be with 10 Methodist congregations starting tomorrow. Encouragement to them is, you don't have to leave Jesus out of the equation here. Right. People expect you to believe something, and they kind of actually want to know why you do what you do. Yes. Yep. And if you're doing what you do because you love, now, if you say, well, I'm doing this so I can get a check from the mayor, or I'm doing this so that we can improve the number of conversions we have. I mean, that kind of bait and switch, that kind of, that's where that trust thing comes in. Yes. Again.
And people smell it from a million miles away, right?
You're exactly right. I mean, they see this coming from the next zip code over. So what we have to do is faithful, sharing the truth in love. Both pieces are important. You don't truly love people if you don't tell them the truth. But if you don't love folks, you can bullhorn them with the truth, and who cares? So both pieces are important. And we just have to be faithful to when God, who's already at work with everybody we're going to work with. Yes. God never left the inner city, and he never left schools, by the way. Yep. And all that silly stuff that we talk about. I mean, we run slap into God in the the underserved, the under-resourced populations, because he's there and he's at work. And so as he opens up those opportunities, I say we've got to be faithful to step into that conversation. Absolutely. And be ready to give an answer for the hope that's in us. And then what happens is, like this, I'm thinking of a group here. I mean, they start a sports league, a community, a neighborhood sports league, not a, so that the kids could belong to something organized besides a gang. Tell you, 3 years in, while they started there wasn't one single family that was in that initial group that was connected to faith community in any way. Now they're all connected to faith community. Jesus, but start the sports league just so we can have a chance to, run out and do a drive-by shooting with a gospel presence. You start that because these kids, you want them to have a better life. What happens is when people are being served and they realize that. I mean, the Spirit just opens up those opportunities.
Absolutely.
Away from them.
Yeah, for sure. A quick example. Last year, our church did we have a pretty robust inclusion ministry. So kids with special needs, but we don't really do anything for adults or young adults. And so we had a number of people challenge, like, maybe we should be doing something on that front. And so last year we hosted a one-time event. We did a prom for kids impacted with special needs. Last year we had about 100 kids come to it. It was amazing. It was literally kingdom on earth stuff, right? It was incredible. This year, and our team, I had very little to do with this. Our team did an incredible job. It went from 100 guests to 500 guests. So it was literally 5 times as big. It was incredible. But it was interesting listening to the feedback from the parents of the guests. The vast majority of the parents of the guests who came, vast majority of these people don't attend our church. We're just serving our community. We're just reaching out to a population saying, hey, we're doing this. We'd love for you to come in. We heard time and time again from parents of the guests saying, oh, I was kind of nervous to come because I thought you guys were going to like preach at us or I kind of the whole night was like waiting for that moment. But then I realized your people just wanted to care for us. Your people just want, and what did that do? That opened up an opportunity to then talk and it asked that question. Well, why are you doing this? Yes. Why are you engaged in this thing? Yeah.
And then it's a very natural
conversation.
It's not some canned marketing thing that, like we're selling Jesus like soap or something. I mean,
exactly.
What's fascinating too about this, I find, is that business uses the business community uses a term lag and lead factors, and when they scorecard. In the church, we're notorious. We just measure lag factors like number of conversions.
Yes.
Well, there's a whole lot of lead things that have to go in, like having conversations with people.
Right.
So you're never going to get more conversions until your conversation rate goes up.
Yes.
And we haven't figured out, I grew up in a tribe where, our pickup line was, you're going to go to hell and fry like sausage. and then we wondered why people didn't want to pursue that conversation. But, you do what you do, or you have you're in a service thing, or you're side. And by the way, evangelism used to be me and you, kind of this confrontational across the table or across a cup of coffee. Most of the evangelism, I think, in this new kingdom paradigm is shoulder to shoulder. People who are working with us, or we're both mentoring in the school, and then those conversations just begin. What motivates you, and that kind of thing. Oh my goodness! Then you're off to a conversation just starts out of who you are.
Absolutely.
Instead of some, let me pull down the and give you a PowerPoint. So I'm seeing it all over.
That's cool. So language, scorecard, what are we measuring? And then what's the third thing we should be wrestling through?
Well, the leadership agenda has to shift. Okay. And we've hinted at a lot of this already.
Yep.
But the leader has to change their own personal scorecard. I was just with 32 district superintendents of education in the state of Texas. They brought me in, by the way. Listen to how the script has flipped. They brought me in to say, how can we engage the faith community in our schools? Help us know how to do that. Can you believe that?
That's amazing.
They're saying we are so desperate for help. Help us know how to get now. There's that part of me that's aggravated at that too, saying, why in the world in the church beating on the door of these superintendents of education saying we're here to help? How can we help? I mean, it's just incredible to me that we're now that the leaders are saying, all right. So one of those superintendents of education stood up and talked about his own district's volunteer reading. It's a client of mine in Northeast Texas, Titus County. Titus County Cares, and they've started Titus County Reads under the umbrella of their larger efforts. Beautiful, beautiful organization. And but this superintendent, he himself reads on Tuesday afternoon. You see, that's the leadership. You got to go first.
Yep.
When you're leading a movement, you don't do that from a memo. You don't do that from the office. You do that in the trenches. You do that in the street. And so, if you want to be a kingdom leader, you yourself have to go first. But you don't go by yourself. I mean, you take people with you. And by the way, this superintendent emailed all of his principals of his school saying, I suggest that you consider being a volunteer reader. And by the way, I'm doing it on Tuesday at Corporate School over here.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is a slam dunk.
Right.
But by the way, he told a story. It was incredible. He was late. The program was only 5 weeks in. He was 10 minutes late to his reading.
Oh, no.
30-minute read. And he came up to the school and he walked through the door, and the child, the second grade boy that he read to, was in the hall on the floor, just bawling his eyes.
Oh my goodness!
And
wow, that's heartbreaking.
Yells out at him and it says, "Hey, and the kid looks up and grins, just takes off running, just jumps and just launches himself into the arms of the student.
Oh, wow, sweet.
It says, to him, wet face, says, "I thought you weren't coming."
Oh my goodness!
10 minutes. I mean, how many people have let that kid down?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this is, we just change life directories one by one by one.
Mm-hmm.
It just matters. I mean, that kid, I mean, he's going to have a chance. Have a chance, a fighting chance. Because someone gave him 30 minutes of uninterrupted attention negatively. Oh my gosh. I mean,
that's incredible. It's incredible. Well, Reggie, this has been amazing. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up for this episode? It's been just, it's just been amazing content. I really appreciate you jumping on today's call.
I mean, there's lots I want to share, but I don't. If I start down another road, I don't know how I'll come back from it. But I would say I'd like to end with saying to leaders, if this stirs your heart a bit and says, yeah, this is something, then just get out there, wade into it. Don't be intimidated by the fact that you don't know how. You're going to screw up, but it's important. We need to screw up more in this area, in order to become a player in this area. And don't make the same mistake over and over, but go ahead, go first, figure it out, and then let that work from inside. That why will begin to show up in your own life, and it'll be an unassailable invitation.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show today. If people want to get in touch with you or with Leadership Network, how can they do that?
Well, our website is LeadNet, short for leadershipnetwork.org. Folks can email me at reggie.mcneal@leadnet.org. It'll find me. And I'd be happy to hear from folks.
Great. Thanks so much, Reggie. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Glad to visit with you, Rich. Talk to you later.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out unSeminary Inbox. You can sign up at unseminary.com and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter @RichBirch or through email rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.